Well, India and Guyana might be geographically far from each other. They're linked by many things, including a strong diaspora, Indian diaspora in that country. With me is the president of Guyana, Irfaan Ali, who is of Indian origin. Welcome to WION, sir. My first question to you is about your India visit. You started your India visit from Indore, from Pravasi Bharatiya Divas convention. How did you see India from the angle of a diaspora, of someone who is leading his country now?
Well, India is leading the G20 as we speak today. India is also one of the fastest growing economies. India is projected to be the third largest economy by 2030. India has been leading in the area of technology, food production, environmental services, human resource development for some time now. Prime Minister Modi's objective of creating a One India policy in which the developmental aspirations of all of India is in line with what we're seeking to achieve in Guyana also, a One Guyana development perspective. But the concept has now been broadened in the One World, One Family theme as India commences its chair of the G20. Our world is faced with many different challenges today, whether it's food security, climate security, energy security, technological transfer, inequalities. In all these areas, India is well positioned to provide global leadership, to provide the type of leadership that is different in its approach. What do I mean? We have seen many countries who are blessed with resources, talent, human resource talent. But during the pandemic, we saw that most countries opted for more inward-looking policies, isolating themselves and protecting themselves first. India demonstrated its full commitment to multilateralism when facing the same challenge. They opened up themselves to supporting the world with vaccines. So, on the question of being a global leader with a difference, India is demonstrating that it is ready and willing to provide a leadership that is different in the world. So I think as a member of coming from ancestors who would have came from India, India is our motherland, I see this role of India expanding. But as you mentioned earlier, one of the challenge is the geographic location of Guyana, the Caribbean, Latin America. It is my humble opinion that Prime Minister Modi is now seeking to ensure that India foreign policy, India developmental agenda and positioning of India must now incorporate the aspirations of all these countries. Today we had the Global South Summit.
I was coming to the Global South Summit. You attended the summit, the opening session. You saw the Indian Prime Minister also addressing it, talking about a new global order where the voice of the South matters. What was the key focus of your country? You attended the summit, and how do you see the global geopolitical order changing, especially when it comes to the multilateral order? For example, the UN. We have seen no reforms at the United Nations.
Well, you know, the Global South Summit is coming at an important time. I said earlier that the reforms won't solve the problem. What we have to do is to find the commonality of our strategy in addressing a few important questions. The developing world is faced with increased burden from the climate crisis, increased burden from the food security, from energy security, from the high cost of energy, from imported inflation, from the supply chain crisis. All of this is dismantling the economies of many developing countries. Many countries are becoming more food insecure. The global order, including the existing multilateral organizations, have not presented any solution to this problem. So India's voice in chairing the G20 must be one that calls for a reordering of the priorities in ensuring climate justice, in ensuring food justice, social justice. We live in a world with a lot, but still all are not benefiting from.
So you pointed to a number of global issues, imported inflation, price rise has been the biggest worry, and one of the key causes has been the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How much has this conflict impacted your country, if you can talk about that?
Well, the conflict has impacted the entire world. The grains, for example, is an input for feed production. Grains is a staple in many countries, and the increased cost of grain, increased cost of fertilizer has driven up the cost of food, has driven up the cost of transportation, has added additional burden on the disposable income for families who need to get food as a necessity. So the conflict in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, has definitely impacted Guyana, as it has impacted all other countries in a negative way.
So, talking about your meetings here in India, you met the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Indore, you met the Indian Energy Minister as well. One of the key focus has been to export oil, export energy from your country to countries like India. If you can talk about that, are we looking to get more energy, more oil contracts from Guyana with India?
So we discussed, I had a number of meetings. We were discussing cooperation on agriculture, on food technology, on health services. So there's many areas in which we're collaborating. The focus of our discussion on the oil and gas sector is to find synergies, to see how we can advance a government-to-government model that will create a win-win position for both Guyana and for India. What we've agreed to do is to set up 2 technical teams, and those technical teams will examine all the possibilities in a sale, whether it's a sale of crude, direct investment in exploration, government-to-government collaboration in exploration and operation. So the technical team would go to work almost immediately. And we are hoping that in a very short time span, we'll have a report from the technical team so that we can determine what are the best options that will create a balanced framework in which both countries can benefit. The Vice President of Guyana will be visiting India in February, and we are hoping by that time we can have a more concrete position on the areas in which we'll move forward together and collaborate on together in the oil and gas sector. But there is a clear undertaking from both governments that we must cooperate, we must collaborate, we must find areas in which we can partner.
And one of the area looks like defense cooperation, military cooperation. The Indian readout, when it comes to your meeting with the Indian Prime Minister, talked about military cooperation. What kind of military cooperation are you looking at? Because India is keen when it comes to more local manufacturing and equipments made in India being used by the world when it comes to the defense sector. So are you looking to buy Indian defense equipments?
So we are in a process now of modernizing our military, replacing equipment, having military hardware. So we are examining all possibility. And a possibility that is available to us is hardware and military equipment and supply from the Indian government, from India. But more importantly, we have already embarked on closer and more elaborate cooperation, military to military cooperation with India. We have a number of our officers being trained in India now, and that number is increasing continuously. So the understanding in terms of the collaboration from the military end is human resource, technology, equipment, and a more integrated relationship, military to military relationship, in supporting Guyana modernization effort and retooling effort of its military.
So let's talk about your country. Your country is one of the fastest growing economies, not only in South America, but almost in entire America's region. Why should an Indian investor come to your country and invest? We know it's a fast growing economy, but in terms of ease of doing business, what opportunities your country provide?
I went through today with the private sector a range of opportunity. By the grace of God, Guyana is blessed with many natural resources. Diamond, gold, silica sand, bauxite. We have an expansive natural resource base to support mega farms and agriculture production. We have access to a market that is more than 200 million strong, most of whom we have trade treaty with. We are building an economy that will stand on many different pillars. We have a forest that stores 19.5 gigatons of carbon. So we are rich in terms of ecological services, climate services, biological services, carbon credit that can earn the country a lot of resources. So the wide array of opportunities that we have is so expansive that it covers varied sectors. We are now working on health and education, for example, positioning Guyana to be a global supplier of health and educational services. India has the technology, they have the human skills, and they have the capacity to be a leading player in working with us in rolling out this agenda.
But given it's a fast growing economy, there are chances of overheating as well. Do you see that happening in your country?
It's a very important question, and it calls for good policies and a full understanding of the priorities that you're spending on, and ensuring that you're not crowding out the private sector, and ensuring that you're not spending at a pace that is so fast and rapid that you're also adding to inflation. That's a real problem, a real challenge, because on the other side of the equation, you have to create the infrastructure that will drive the growth. You have to invest in a transformative infrastructure that will bring the investment in. You have to have stable electricity. You can't be spending 5-6 hours in traffic. You have to have good health services, good educational services, good infrastructure. This costs money. If you overspend, then you run the risk of overheating. So overheating is a real issue that we are managing very carefully and finding the right balance and the right pace to ensure that we don't crowd out the private sector or overheat the economy.
So coming back to the global geopolitics, we were talking about the reforms at the multilateral institutions. UN reform is something that has been talked about. India has been focusing on UN reforms and would like to be seen at the high table as a permanent member of the UNSC. Would your country back India as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council?
We have already communicated to India officially that Guyana has no objection in supporting India.
Also, sir, another key issue that has been dominating the global agenda is the issue of climate change. What are the worries for your country when it comes to climate change, and how do you see India's leadership when it comes to the issue of climate change? We have the International Solar Alliance, which has been focused a lot by New Delhi.
So not only the International Solar Alliance, India is modernizing its agriculture, reducing waste, reducing emission from agriculture, looking at green hydrogen, transforming itself in terms of EV, electrical vehicles, electronic vehicles. All of this and the renewable energy platform that Prime Minister Modi is pursuing, all of this is adding to the reduction of emission and the strong commitment that India has to improve things internally. I think is evidence of not only the commitment of India, but also the call for action. Our country, as I said, is blessed. Even with the development of our oil and gas sector, we are still net carbon sink. We have our forest stored 19.5 gigatons of carbon. We just signed one of the largest carbon credit deal with the end user, Hess Corporation. But we acknowledge that we live in a world in which climate change is having disastrous impact. We are a low-lying country. We still have to find money to build out our sea defenses. Being 6 feet below the Atlantic, we have to find money to build dikes, to build sea defenses. Who is going to find that capital for us? So the big problem that we are faced with is the increasing debt burden of small island developing states, the lack of access to capital, lack of access to cheap capital now because it's mostly variable rates you're getting on the market, and the inability of the developed world to meet its obligation that it continues to make a different COP.
Do you think the developed world has failed when it comes to their climate commitments?
Totally. Not accidentally, but totally. And what we have seen is that many of the loans are not concessional, even the new loans for adaptation and mitigation. There is no grant element. So how is it you're supporting small island development states and in their mitigation and adaptation measure? So I want to say to you that there is tremendous opportunity ahead, and Guyana intends to work closely with India as a strong and strategic bilateral partner in pursuing the ambitions of both countries to create a more peaceful world, a world in which there is dignity and respect, and a world in which the challenges of climate change, energy security, food security, and human resource talent.
And pandemic as well, where we saw...
Yes, pandemic, that this world, this challenging world that we live in, can see with strong leadership some improvement and gain in the immediate future.
So now coming to the diaspora angle, we started with the diaspora angle, and I like to finish with the diaspora angle is that you celebrate your Indianness. We have seen your visuals of playing Holi as well with our High Commissioner there. And how do you essentially make sure that India is part of your day-to-day life in your country, given you're an Indian origin leader?
Well, Guyana is a beautiful country. We are blessed with 6 different ethnic groups. Like India, we are very multicultural. We have different religious belief. So what we have done very beautifully in India is learn to coexist with each other, learn to support each other's culture, learn to integrate each other's culture, and blend it in such a way that we have our own original version of what makes up the Guyanese identity, supported by the traditions, the culture of 6 different people, melted together in one pot to give you a truly unique Guyanese experience. So yes, every day as we celebrate our Guyanese-ness, if you want to put it that way, we are indeed celebrating our heritage of 6 different people melted together in the Guyanese people.
And personally asking you, you are now part of that growing list of world leaders who are Indian origin leaders, whether it's Europe, whether it's your continent. How do you find it that there is increased number of global leaders with Indian heritage?
Well, let me put it this way. The diaspora, the Indian diaspora is very large and has transcended many eras. So what you're seeing now is elements of that diaspora contributing to the development of many different societies, now emerging into the spotlight and into leadership position. The diaspora and India main concern is how to create a better world. It is not how to create more Indian leader. That is good from the diaspora perspective. But how do we use the diaspora and India to create a better world in which there is peace? And Prime Minister Modi spoke about this. And that is the objective of India. So the diaspora should attach itself to the lofty goals of peace, stability, justice, multilateralism, rule of law, democracy. Once we are supporting these elements, then we are contributing positively to humanity.
And how do you see you contributing to India? You have contributed to India in many senses. India is proud of you. You said that India is your motherland. But how can the diaspora contribute to India's growth story, something which is celebrated? India is soon going to be the 3rd largest economy, something the diaspora will be proud of.
It is easy. And that is exactly what we're doing. Guyana is working with India in championing many issues. We are part of the Solar Alliance. We are working with India on many renewable energy projects. We are working with India on energy security. We are working with India on food security. So by supporting the commonality of the objectives to create a better world, we are actually supporting the vision of Prime Minister Modi, especially this time when he leads the G20 in building a world in which indeed we are one world and one family.
And do you speak Hindi or Bhojpuri or any other languages or something that has been a cultural aspect of your life?
Hindi, Tora, but I can dance good Bollywood music.
It must be popular there.
Bollywood is very popular.
Okay, very popular. And can you sing some songs for us? I mean, something your favorite songs you can
Then I will spoil the viewers' evening or morning, and I will not sing. But are you married?
Yeah, I'm married.
Okay, I was going to tell you when you get married, I'll come and dance. So on your next occasion, if I'm here, you'll invite me and I'll dance.
My daughter's marriage.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, and God bless you. And I want to say to the government and people of India how grateful myself and my delegation we are to the hospitality, and we look forward to working in a stronger, more sustained and focused way with India in developing a bilateral outlook that will create a win-win for Guyana and India. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION, and pleasure having you here with us with WION. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So there you have it, the President of Guyana speaking to WION on a host of subjects, whether it is the Diaspora Connect, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and of course, the bilateral relationship with New Delhi.